There is so much hate in the world. And I say this with awe. And I'm speaking to the people, right? The hate, for the most part, and I'm being honest here, from reflection, comes from being taught. And a lot of that teaching, that divisiveness, we'll call it, a lot of it comes from governance. A lot of this comes from governance funded, which the funds come from the people. And the lobbyists that propel or fuel all of this, specialty groups we'll call them, that get their revenue from governance, that the money comes from the people. Because there's no business in divisiveness. There's no business in hate. But the business comes from the people's money. And if you remove your rose-colored glasses and remove the blinders of a horse, you would find a lot of what I'm speaking about is fact. And it's the truth. You know, I live a very fasting mindset. And I've been doing so since June of 2019. And your Socrates of the world, your Einsteins, your old books will speak about their brightest moments come from fasting. Clarity comes from fasting. And I have a lot of clarity in the last few years where the amount of hate that has been synchronized, the divisiveness, the created by governance, created by leaders that should be leaders, but leaders don't divide. The leaders bring people together. And those that divide, they're not leaders. Years ago, we went to the World Series, my wife and I, in Chicago. And we had booked that trip a year in advance. And here's an example where when we got off the subway that week, when we got there, and I told my wife, do you feel that? And she mocks me with my reading of people's eyes and my energies and feelings. And we call it my dyslexic mind, call it what you want, my third mind, my third eye. But I felt it. And it was crazy that week, how positive Chicago was. And long story short, one of my wife's friend, long-term law enforcement, her friend from youth, and had been in law enforcement for over 25 years. And she talked about a lot of things. And over dinner, I asked her, how's your crime rate? To which she explained statistically that it was down dramatically, like dramatically. And that is fact. That is science. Here's another science. Back in the 90s, during the World Series, during the Super Bowl, where they explained how the winning teams compared to the losing Super Bowl team, that those that lost, the assault and spousal abuse jumped up dramatically, right? And then you have the teachings of divisiveness, the business of racism. It's extremely prominent now. And we live in a synchronized society, call it a globalist society, whatever you want. They can't synchronize, they can't even find a local criminal, but somehow they can synchronize and put everything together globally on a lot of the agendas that has been transpiring. And that's what's frustrating, right? Because it all comes from the people's money. Everything that transpires, government has no money. A very intellectual politician taught me one day that government has no money, never had any money. All the money comes from the people. So if they were to manage the money properly, I'm in Cabo right now, and we had a condo that was right off the ocean, literally right off the ocean. You see the cruise ships. And that 2,500 square feet, rooftop patio, the whole 9 yards. Our taxation was $300 US a year. And if you paid in advance, you got 10% off. I live in Ottawa, Canada. My taxes are what, $7,000, a little over, $7,500 a year. I'm on sewer and septic. And you get sometimes snow plowing. When governance gets too big, when they create their own 10-for-1 workforce, and again, I'm speaking from a man that worked 28 years in governance and 33 years in business simultaneously. There's not too many human beings that have worked both paths simultaneously for all those decades. So I understand both of them quite well, and I speak from knowledge, training, and experience. I don't speak out of my ass. So when I say to you that divisiveness and racism and the business of hate is taught, I'm speaking from knowledge, training, and experience. So it comes from all of us that we need to change. We need to come together as a society. We need to put our hand up and say, stop with your teachings of hate and divisiveness. Could you imagine if our money was managed properly? You manage the better roads, the better society, the better school, the better programs. And I believe in programs because I come from a background that programs work, where we got inmates that we taught them sheet metal, we taught them carpentry, we taught them why they're there. And all those individuals that went through all those programs, the recidivism rate was over 30% less. Because in institutions, your inmate number was like a social insurance number. It follows you everywhere. So there was a tracking of recidivism. And at the institution I worked at back in the day, which was a treatment and program and correctional type facility, they tracked those inmates. And it was a 30% less recidivism, those that went through trades or programs. Imagine that, teaching somebody a skill set, right? Instead of locking them up and throwing away the key. It doesn't work. Just like teaching hate and teaching divisiveness and leaders that speak so divisively. Just pay attention to leaders in Canada and US in the last 3 years. Nothing comes out of their mouth that's unifying. They're not leaders. They're divisive. I'll leave it at that. Jean-Guy Bourguignon, Jean-Guy Public Communicator, from Cabo with love. Big, healthy hugs to each and every one of you. Ciao. Hasta luego.